The Zenith Aegis was a place of absolute compliance. Every corridor hummed with a verified frequency. The air felt heavy with the scent of ozone and the relentless pressure of protocol. My primary duty as a junior medical initiate was to ensure the resonator array remained within documented safety margins. It was a role of high precision. Failure meant a permanent strike on my career record. Across the sterile bay, the human was working. His name was Victor Vane. He was not a doctor or a scientist. He was a sanitation technician. Victor moved with a strange, chaotic rhythm that disturbed my sense of order. He was currently polishing the floor scrubbing unit near the diagnostic bay. Everything was documented. Everything was safe. I will show you how a single heartbeat can rewrite the laws of an empire. If you stay to witness the cost of the miracle that was about to happen. The emergency signal shattered the silence. It was a high-frequency pulse that made my internal resonance shift into a jarring, dissonant chord. Director Alara Voss ran onto the deck. Her face was pale. She shouted for the bay to be cleared for an immediate Hegemony arrival. This was unprecedented. Humans and Australians rarely shared medical space. The Australis Hegemony regarded us as biological noise. We were the weak species. We were the evolutionary clutter of the galaxy. But then the airlock hissed open. Sovereign Theron entered first. He was tall, his skin the color of polished bone. Behind him, 4 guards carried a suspension litter. On it lay Archon Lyra. She was the heart of their culture. Now she was dying. Her silver eyes were dimming, the chrome-like finish fading into a dull, leaden gray. Energy sickness. It was a terminal misalignment of the bioelectric field. There was no cure in the Hegemony archives. Initialize the resonator array, Director Voss commanded. Her voice lacked its usual stability. I hurried to the console. My fingers shook. I checked the compliance logs twice. The Archon was placed within the ring of the machine. The Sovereign stood nearby. His presence was like a gravitational well. Every time he moved, the plates of his ceremonial armor clicked with a sound like breaking ice. I felt my own bioluminescence flickering. It was a sign of extreme stress. Victor Vane did not leave. He stood in the corner, clutching his cleaning supplies. I noticed the smell of synthetic citrus floor scrub lingering on his gloves. It was a sharp and artificial scent that didn't belong in a medical emergency. Why was he still there? He should have evacuated. The resonator array began to glow. The energy sickness was a parasite. It fed on the Archon's frequency. We had to stabilize her. I watched the monitors. The human biosignature was a mess of variables. The Australian one was a perfect, rigid line, but the line was breaking. Suddenly a screech. The sound was high and metallic. It ripped through the diagnostic bay like a physical blade. The resonator array's primary coil began to glow a violent, angry red. The cooling systems were failing. Protocol dictated a manual override, but the heat was already warping the air. The Sovereign's guards stepped back. Their silver eyes silvered into a mirror finish, reflecting their fear. They could not touch the machine. The energy discharge would kill an Australian instantly. Victor didn't hesitate. He dropped his cleaning rag. He lunged toward the console. Wait, the protocol says... I couldn't finish the sentence. The human was already moving. He reached past the sparking terminals. His hand bypassed the safety shields. He hit the emergency reset button with a force that cracked the plastic casing. But in his momentum, his other arm brushed against Archon Lyra's bare skin. The jolt was visible. It wasn't electricity. It was a ripple of pure light that started at the point of contact. Victor's skin-to-skin hand contact with the Archon acted as a bridge. For a second, the room went silent. The machine died. The red glow faded. I stared at the readout. It was impossible. The Archon's terminal energy sickness hadn't just paused. It had stabilized. The rigid, dying Australian frequency had wrapped itself around the chaotic human biosignature. It was using him as a universal adapter. Victor pulled his hand away. He looked terrified. His skin was flushed. Humans were so warm. It was a heat that registered like a fever on my internal sensors. He looked at his hand as if it belonged to someone else. The sovereign moved. He didn't thank the technician. He didn't offer praise. He drew his ceremonial blade, the edge humming with a low decibel threat. "Detain him," Theron barked. His voice was a tectonic shift. "The human has interfered with the Archon's essence. He is a thief or a weapon. I want him in a high-security cell. Now." Director Voss tried to speak. She mentioned medical neutrality. She spoke of the treaty. The sovereign ignored her. His guards moved with a brutal, multi-limbed coordination. They grabbed Victor by the shoulders. He didn't fight. He just looked at the Archon. Lyra's eyes were open now. They weren't leaden anymore. They were bright, reflecting the human's face with a terrifying clarity. I was tasked with the initial detention logs. My career was now tied to a human who had broken every rule of biology. It was a dangerous position. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's climate control. The human bioelectric signature was now the most valuable resource in the hegemony, and I was the one who had to document its exploitation. Days passed in a blur of classified data. Victor was kept in the lower levels. The sovereign refused to let him leave. He claimed it was for investigation. But we all knew the truth. Lyra needed him. And every time Victor was moved further than 50 meters from her, the Archon's levels began to drop. She was tethered to him. It was a biological debt that the hegemony found insulting. I entered the detention suite to deliver a meal. Victor was sitting on the edge of a cot. He looked small. His species was so fragile, yet he was the only thing keeping an empire's heart beating. "Are you okay?" I asked. I shouldn't have. It was a violation of my clinical detachment. "I just wanted to fix the machine," Victor said. He sounded tired. "I didn't mean to become a battery." I checked his vitals. His heart rate was elevated. It was a rapid, thumping sound that felt primitive. I wondered if the Archon's silver eyes would ever... The lights flickered. A heavy, rhythmic thud echoed through the floorboards. It wasn't the station's engines, or it was an external impact. The Zenith Aegis groaned under the stress of a docking clamp being forced. "We are under attack," the intercom screamed. It wasn't an enemy empire. It was Commander Varric. He was the Sovereign's most decorated duke, but he was also a man who believed in the purity of the Australian bloodline. He didn't want a human cure. He wanted a human specimen. The door to the cell hissed open. It wasn't the guards. It was a tactical team in unmarked black armor. They moved with a predatory grace. They didn't speak. They fired a stun bolt at me. I felt my resonance shatter as I hit the floor. The last thing I saw was Victor being hauled out of the room. He was a puzzle to be solved. And Commander Varric was a man who didn't mind breaking the pieces to find the answer. On the resonance in my chest was a jagged ruin when I finally regained consciousness. It felt as if my internal frequency had been scrubbed raw by a tectonic plate. Director Voss was leaning over me, her own silver eyes clouded with a frantic, pulsing light that suggested she hadn't slept since the abduction. The Zenith Aegis was no longer a place of quiet compliance. It was a war room. "They took him to the Sector 7 asteroid belt," Voss said. Her voice was thin, brittle. "Varric has a decommissioned research facility there. It's a black site. Officially, it doesn't exist." I tried to stand. My coordination was failing. I leaned against a cold wall, my fingers brushing against a chipped ceramic cooling unit tile near the floor. It was a tiny, sharp imperfection in the otherwise smooth surface. I counted the jagged edges of the chip to stay grounded. 1, 2, 3. I didn't want to think about what Varric was doing to Victor. The commander didn't see a person. He saw a biological anomaly. He saw a puzzle to be solved. No, that's too kind. He saw a specimen to be dissected until its secrets were laid bare on a tray. The Sovereign is launching a full-scale siege, I noted. My internal sensors detected the massive shift in the station's gravity. The Australis Hegemony fleet was moving. But why? He called Victor a weapon. He called him a weapon so the Council wouldn't realize he's a necessity, Voss whispered. We were ushered onto the Sovereign's flagship, the Apex Radiance. I was no longer a simple initiate. I was a witness. I was the only one who had recorded the specific bioelectric frequency shift during the initial contact. Archon Lyra was there too. She looked stronger, but her movements were stiff, her silver eyes scanning the stars with a hunger that was almost frightening. She wasn't just recovering, she was searching for her tether. The jump to Sector 7 was instantaneous. The black site was a brutalist structure of dark metal, clinging to a jagged rock like a parasite. Varric's ships moved to intercept us. The space between the fleets became a web of energy discharge. I sat in the triage bay. I avoided looking at the data on my own damaged resonance. It didn't matter. If her Victor died, the Archon would follow within hours. The hegemony would collapse. All our rigid, perfect order would shatter into the very chaos we once mocked in humans. The siege was a symphony of violence. I followed the Archon's personal guard into the breach, and the air inside the black site smelled of stagnant air and burned insulation. We fought through level after level of Varric's loyalists. Their plate armor loosened in the heat of the corridors, clicking rhythmically as they fell. Finally, we reached the core. Victor was there. He wasn't on a cot. He was suspended in an experimental resonator array that had been modified for extraction. His human biosignature was screaming. The monitors were a frantic mess of red peaks. Varric stood at the controls, his face a mask of zealotry. "You are destroying the only thing that can save us," Lyra shouted. Her voice carried a harmonic resonance that made the walls vibrate. "I am securing our future," Varric countered. "We will not be dependent on a human's warmth." The Sovereign's guards moved. Varric realized he had lost. He didn't surrender. He drew a hidden energy pistol and aimed it directly at the Archon. The barrel began to glow with a lethal, concentrated charge. Victor saw it first. Despite the wires and the exhaustion, he moved. He tore himself from the array, the sensors ripping from his skin with a wet, sickening sound. He threw himself into the path of the lethal energy discharge to shield Archon Lyra as the assassin fired from the crowd. The bolt hit him in the center of the chest. It was a sound like a thunderclap in a small room. Victor collapsed. He was still bleeding. The Sovereign's guards vaporized Varric before he could fire again, but the damage was done. The human lay on the floor. His biosignature was a flat gray line. Archon Lyra fell to her knees beside him. She didn't use a medical scanner. She reached out and took his hand, skin to skin, just as he had done in the lab. The room went cold. I watched as the Archon's silver eyes flared. She wasn't taking energy this time. She was giving it. She was pouring her own refined frequency into the human's chaotic, dying frame. It was a biological feedback loop that defied every textbook in the Zenith Aegis archives. "Get him to a regenerative tank," she commanded. It wasn't a request. It was the voice of a being who had looked into the void and refused to let it take what was hers. The transition back to the station was a blur of high-stakes medical intervention. We placed Victor inside an advanced Australian regenerative tank. The fluid was a shimmering, bioluminescent blue. I watched him float there. He looked so small. His chest moved with a slow, mechanical rhythm. Sovereign Theron stood outside the tank for 3 days. He didn't leave. He didn't eat. On the 4th day, he called for a galactic broadcast. He held a small, glowing pyramid, the Nexus Core. It was the highest honor in the hegemony. "This human has shown us the limit of our perfection," the Sovereign announced to a billion silver eyes across the stars. "We called them weak. We called them chaos. But it is their chaos that holds the key to our survival. Today I sign the Treaty of the Zenith. Humanity is no longer a subject species. They are our equals. Victor woke up a week later. He looked at the Nexus core sitting on his bedside table as if it were a strange piece of fruit. He didn't care about the metal. He only cared when Lyra walked into the room. She didn't bow. She didn't follow protocol. She simply sat on the edge of the tank and took his hand. I am now assigned to the Accordance. It is a multi-species hospital ship. We are leaving for the Outer Rim tomorrow. My career as a simple initiate is over. I am a chronicler now. I am the one who records the moments when two biologies, never intended to touch, find the one frequency that matters. The viewport of the new ship shows the twin suns of the Hegemony setting behind the curve of the planet. Victor stands at the glass. Lyra is beside him. Their hands are still joined, fingers laced in a way that suggests a permanent, deliberate tether. The silver of her eyes perfectly reflects the warm, uneven glow of his human skin. A single quiet pulse of bioluminescence travels from her shoulder down to his wrist. The stars beyond the glass are cold, but the reflection in the window remains bright and steady.